They think that they're sort of Greek philosophers and we're Roman legionaries. So we are the muscle, but we're stupid, and they're smart, but they're too moral to have armies and militaries. So in their way of thinking, Macron is, well, I shall come to you, Donald, and I will give you a plan that our beautiful intellectuals have thought up. And you and your, I don't know what you call them, the B1, the B2, I don't know what they are, but you just go do it according to our direction. That's how they think.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our weekend episode where we do something a little bit different in the middle segment, and Victor's looking at 1945, World War II, the end of World War II today. So an exciting moment for our historical study. And we'll do more news first, and of course the Iran-Israeli war is at top of the agenda. We got lots more questions. I know we treated it on Friday, but we're going to do it again in just a few minutes after this message. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So Victor, there's so many things to ask you about, but maybe I'll start with the media coverage of the war on Iran by Israel. And that is that the Wall Street Journal has reported by 3 anonymous sources that Donald Trump has approved a plan to attack Iran. And Donald Trump replied with the Wall Street Journal doesn't know anything that he's talking about.
Yeah, there's 2 things. Carolyn Levitt said that he was going to make a decision in the next 2 weeks. Well, what I think they're saying is he's already decided on a plan. Doesn't mean he's adopted the plan yet. He's ready to go. And he's moving assets in the region, tankers, fighters, bombers, carrier task forces. So we'll just see in the next 2 weeks. And what is he waiting for? Well, what he's waiting for is the maximum amount of damage that the Israelis can do, both to ensure the air defenses of Iran are non-existent, and they have gone from air superiority to air supremacy. There are some rumors out that the Israelis themselves, under pressure from Trump, are in talks with General Kurilla about mechanisms that they could take out some of the more difficult nuclear facilities that are under 100 yards of solid rock. And what do I mean by that? Either drop commandos in. I think they would not have much chance of surprise. It's a Texas-sized country with over 90 million people. Or they have in Afghanistan, the United States dropped a mother of all bombs. It wasn't a bunker buster, but it was very heavy from a C-130. They can carry 40,000 pounds. So maybe the Israelis are thinking if we have air supremacy, a slow-moving 250-mile-an-hour C-130 flying at 30,000 feet at night or something might make it through, and they could drop one. Maybe they could at least drop one and have 2 or 3 of them in succession. So they're thinking of ways to handle the possibility that the United States will not intervene in the next 2 weeks. I don't think anybody knows what we're going to do. Donald Trump is trying to deal with the apostates in his administration. The Wall Street Journal, of all the organs of news on the center right, they have the least insight into the Trump administration because they have been so negative. I mean, every single initiative, trade, tariffs, recession, unemployment, inflation, Donald Trump this, and they've been wrong on every single one. We saw the May statistics. There has been a monthly rate of inflation that dropped to the lowest in 4 years. There's been a increase in personal income, personal savings. There's been good GDP growth. There's been everything that you would want, and yet you never see that in the pages of the Wall Street Journal. So I think when Donald Trump said, well, they don't know what they're talking about, that reflected a larger disdain for them. And when you look at, as I've said before on these videos, when you look at the bylines of the reporters and you click them on and you want to see where they came from, where they gravitated, you can see a shift in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know which of the Murdochians is running it, but someone has moved it to the left because they are drawing reporters and their news divisions from Politico, Washington Post, New York Times, Atlantic, and it's noticeable. So they're not going to have any influence. They're not going to be a receptacle of leaks. The only other thing, very quickly, is it is a mistake to think that someone in the administration, in the media, or in the MAGA movement is so close to Donald Trump, is so protected that they can publicly either leak or attack him. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I've met her. I've been on a venue with her. I think she's great. But when she gave that assessment that Iran was not immediately going to make a bomb, that was belied by a lot of other intelligence networks in Europe and Israel and our own. But more importantly, when someone leaked that she might resign if he does use force. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was a leak. And more importantly, when she gave that report, I'm glad that it's independent, it's not weaponized, but that's not, Donald Trump said he just ignored her and she's on the outs. And I like, as I said, I've got a lot of criticism from people on the right. On the, I guess you'd call it the center right. I like Tucker Carlson. I was on his show mostly Monday nights right after prime time on the A block. But when he says that Donald Trump is going to lose his administration by belying MAGA, and you factor in the fact that they leaked those Dominion lawsuit comments he made that he couldn't stand Donald Trump. I think he said that 2 days before January 6th. And then he had to say in this debate with Ted Cruz, it was a fascinating debate. They both went at it, that he loves Donald Trump. But when that leak gets to Donald Trump, that's why Donald Trump used the word kook. He's a kooky. Donald Trump is absolutely transactional. He does not care what you think your relationship is with him. If you leak and if you attack him publicly, whether, I don't know, justifiably or not, he's going to reply and he's going to remember it. And so that's, he said in the comment, I've never been more popular with the MAGA base. I looked at most of the polls. He's right. The MAGA base is people who identify at MAGA overwhelmingly 60, which poll you read, it depends, 60 to 70% support United States help to Israel and a United States possible 1 or 2 time strike on them. So
what you just said reminded me of an interview that I saw, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy who was talking, but he said that they were asking him about the current events in Iran, and he said that the Iranians didn't read the art of the deal. Donald Trump offers his best deal the first time, and after that, they're not going to get as good of a deal. And that was a really...
When I wrote the case for Trump, I think I read The Art of the Deal, The Art of the Comeback. I think there were 9 books in that series. And it's just sort of a textbook about what he does. Notice that he hasn't really trashed the Iranians as they deserve. He said, well, I want to negotiate. They should have took the deal. I said 60 days, and they didn't do it. But you read The Art of the Deal, it's very interesting. He says that you go in and you just demand the world, but you have a predetermined level of advantage, let's say 55% in your interest, but you want 90, and you scream and you yell and you threaten, and you get maybe 54%. And then you cut the deal, and then you lament that you were taken, but you never, ever attack your former adversary. You praise him. That's what he does with Putin. Everybody said he's a Putin puppet because no. He's trying to be transactional with Putin. And the same thing with the Iranians. He could have said all sorts of things about him. He said, I want him to negotiate. We can negotiate. It's not as crazy as you think, because there are a lot of scenarios for the end game of this war. The only end game that will be acceptable to Israel are there can be no nuclear infrastructure remaining. Doesn't mean they can't in a future time rebuild it, but for this foreseeable 5 to 10 years, there will be no ability to make a bomb. Number two, there will be no fissionable material, enriched uranium or plutonium derivatives that can make a bomb anywhere. And the present government not only will not be there, but a replacement like it will not be there. Now, Israel can't determine that because that has to come from the Iranian people, but those are its three war aims. Our war aims, as I understand the Trump administration, strategically were parallel to them. We want an end to all of the nuclear material and all of the nuclear facilities, but we don't want to ourselves, if we can help it, go in and take them out. So we want a mechanism of the Israelis to come up with their usual brilliance and figure out how to do it. There was a column today by Michael Oren. He was the ambassador from Israel. He was a brilliant author of the 6 Days of War, about the 6 Day War. He had the same literary agent as I did. And he said, looking for looking for a bomb or anybody. I mean, just give us, can we lease? Can we buy an old B-52? And that got people really enraged. Why would we give you a strategic bomber? But one thing I don't understand about the Israelis, and they spend, I don't know what they are, 60 to 70 million dollars for a F-35, and maybe, I don't know, for a souped up F-16 or F-15. 30, 40 million? Can't they get some type of either a C-130 or C-17, some type of civilian plane like a old 747 and refit it as a bomber? Because they need one or two of them. Because this is going to come up again. And if they had that, they would be successful.
Well, I was looking at today at Times of Israel, which is not necessarily a right wing paper, but they were talking about Mossad. I don't know if you saw the article, but just how the recent leader of Mossad, David Barnea, has really transformed it. And they didn't quite say this, but it led to this conclusion that he made this whole attack possible. All the work that Mossad did
Yeah, I
inside of
think the
Iran.
difference is that under his direction, he assumes there's going to be a war. Now, they missed October 7th, but he assumes there's going to be a war. Then the next question he asks himself is, what can intelligence authorities do to aid the war effort? I don't mean by gathering intel. I mean actual detriment to the enemy. And so then he places operatives years ahead inside Iran, dissidents, and pays them. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they got the drones in. They say they put them in crates, they put them in trucks, they land them. Do they go out to the desert? Do they go through a neighboring country? Do they work with dissidents? I don't know how they do it. But on the first day of the war, those drones took out a lot of Iranian defense capability. And more importantly, they have wiped out 20 of the top military leaders. They had to know where they were. They had to know where they sleep. They know exactly where the physicists were. They took out probably 15 of them. And they know where Khamenei is. And now that he attacked a hospital, I'm sure they're going to take him out. I don't think people would be necessarily in Iran upset about it. But I do think if we do intervene, they will try. Tom Cotton in 2024 had a very mercurial, irate exchange with Lloyd Austin. And he said to him at one time, how many times has Iran attacked us in Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, our installations? And 70, maybe. I think actually the number is 200. And he said, how many times have we responded? Well, we responded different. How many times? 5. And so what he was getting at is that Iran, through its surrogates, has an ability to attack. I think they killed 3 Americans and they injured some, but they have an ability to attack these people. And I just like to editorialize for our audience here for a second. I don't want to go back and blame prior administrations, but if you look at the root of this entire fiasco of 47 years, 6 years of this evil regime, it was Jimmy Carter. He was president of the United States when we had an ally Yes, he was autocratic. Yes, he was right wing. Yes, there was Savak. But compared to the alternative in the region, he was modern. He was pro Western. He helped us with the Straits of Hormuz. He guaranteed oil for us. And he was a solid ally. And Jimmy Carter fell for that European Michel Foucault French fascination with Khomeini. And the French flew Khomeini in there with his cassettes. And when they took those hostages and they attacked that was an act of war. And he had the ability to really hurt that regime. He could have bombed their oil. He could have bombed their military bases and given them a lesson. It's a and I also have some criticism of Ronald Reagan. When they blew up the Marine barracks in Lebanon and the U.S. Embassy, and we just lobbed some military, I think the New Jersey or the Iowa shelled the Bekaa Valley, that was not enough. And they were inured. And then when you have Joe Biden, who took the terrorist designation away from the Houthis, first thing he did, oh, they're not terrorists. Then they started up again. And then we had these attacks on our installations. He didn't reply to them. And then he begged and begged, please, please, can we get back in the Iran deal? Oh, you need some money? Here's $100 billion for your future of oil revenue sales to China. Oh, Hezbollah, well, we'll negotiate with them. Maybe we'll take Hezbollah's side on who really owns offshore gas with the Israelis when their fight. Oh, Turkey objects to the pipeline, the Med pipeline. Oh, we'll go against our own allies, Israel and Cyprus, and side with Turkey and cancel it. But we'll say it's climate change. It was just systematic, repetitive, serial. All they did was make as much daylight between themselves and Israel and pander and appease Iran and its tentacles. And this is what we got. And sometimes I get irritated when I don't get irritated. I get amused when Carolyn I like her so much. She's so self-assured. She's so beautiful. She's so poised. And I look at the faces of the left-wing people like, why isn't she uglier? Why isn't she older? Why doesn't she make mistakes? Why is she so confident? Why does she praise Donald Trump? But when when I see all of those, you know, the Trump reinforcement that everything, and I think they've got a real. I kind of get angry. I'm trying to stumble a minute. My first impulse is just get over Joe Biden. Because Carol, it's like a little speck. She starts to speak and she says, and Donald Trump, and this was because of the derelict Biden administration. And then Trump goes, he starts talking about the Houthis. And he said, well, we cut a deal with them and they're not going to talk the Red Sea. But it was the awful Biden. You know, he was the worst president. Biden did that to Trump, only he did it with the FBI. And then Trump said something that was really funny the other day. They asked him about his attitude about his enemies, more or less. And he said, I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. That sent everybody crazy because he's been hunted.
So, Victor, I just want to ask you about China and Europe before we go on to World War II. China, apparently there was a transport plane that was lost from radar right around the Iranian region. So we're not sure if China is trying to stealthily.
It was supposed to be going to Luxembourg.
Yes.
And I guess a Chinese part owner was a Chinese firm or consortium. And it disappeared, so we can imagine what that was. They were either sending, I don't think they were sending fissionable material, but who knows? They were probably sending more drones or missile guidance systems, something. And I mean, they buy, as I said, 50% of the Middle East oil. But before Trump came in under Biden, they were buying 90% of Iranian oil. And they were part of the Russian, Iranian, North Korean axis. The problem with it is three of them are nuclear, and Iran may or may not be. So that is something we have to watch when we have nuclear Russia, nuclear China, and then crazy nuclear North Korea and crazy almost nuclear Iran. Their basic attitude is, we think you're stupid. The Chinese, this is their view of the United States. We think you're stupid. We think you're decadent. We think you don't earn your riches, and you You shouldn't be any competitor of ours. We're smarter than you are. We're better than you are. We're more numerous than you are. We're going to destroy you someday. But for some weird reason, you have more power than we do. And that's not fair. So we're going to do everything we can to hurt you. We're going to send people in with fungus to destroy your crops. We're going to send people to Reedley, California, who will have all sorts of weird strains of vira and bacteria. We're going to send drones probably off the coast to test your defenses. We're going to send a balloon. We don't think you're going to do anything. We're going to send 300,000 students, and 290,000 of them are going to appropriate your technology. They're not going to be spies, but they're going to come back and help us. 10% are. 10,000 more than that. Um, well, maybe 30,000, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 are going to be actively engaged with intelligence for China. And that's their attitude. And when you bite back, you're a racist. Yellow peril of the 19th century. Oh, no, 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 no. We helped you in World War II. And then you turned on us and got a communist government and killed a lot of us in Korea and created this North Korean monstrosity. They're capable of anything, anything. And I won't even get into the lab origins of Wuhan. Best case scenario, that the Chinese People Liberation Army, who controlled the lab, gave a contract to a civilian affiliated group to make a virus and a vaccination, experiment and gain and function, and get all the information you could after stupid, idiotic naifs like Peter Daszak at EcoHealth and Fauci and Michael Cole. And the worst, it was a bioweapon. And they didn't and the worst, it was it got out because of lax security. And the worst, conspiratorial perhaps, is they let it out. Or if they didn't let it out, as soon as it was out, they let it spread and shut down all flights from Wuhan domestically and let people from Wuhan go all over Europe and the United States for 2 weeks.
And now they think we're still stupid because they've had students bring in a fungus that could cause blight in our staple crops. They're buying land near our
I shouldn't
bases.
say they think we're stupid. We are stupid. That's what they do. That's what they did under Biden. That balloon should have been blown up the first moment it got into Alaskan airspace. And we didn't do anything. Just as a point of honor.
So let me go to the last thing here, or the second thing. The Europeans, apparently France has intimated that they want to have the European powers resolve this Israel-Iran war, and Macron is leading that, number one. And then we've had in Britain a bunch of actors and people in the entertainment community that are trying to pressure their Prime Minister Starmer to stop selling arms to Israel. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on European responses.
Yeah, the French kicked out the Israeli arms merchants at their international arms show. I think the Israelis, when they left a little sign. If you're interested, look at what we're doing against Iran, or turn on the TV and see our weapons in action, something to that effect. They go way back with Iran. I mean, they're neo-imperialists. They always were. They divided up the Sykes-Picot. They divided up. They got Lebanon, they got Syria, the British got Iraq and Egypt, and Jordan, and they feel they have a special historical tie to the Middle East, and they think that they're sort of Greek philosophers and we're Roman legionnaires. So we are the muscle, but we're stupid, and they're smart, but they're too moral to have armies and militaries. So in their way of thinking, Macron is, well, I shall come to you, Donald, and I will give you a plan that our beautiful intellectuals have thought up. And you and your, I don't know what you call them, the B1, the B2, I don't know what they are, but you just go do it according to our direction. That's how they think. And they're nuts. They have no power. Their economies are ossified and fossilized. Only thing I'm curious of, in the G7, the Italian prime minister was rolling her eyes to Macron. And we think it was because he said something stupid. I think it was because Donald Trump was leaving and she thought that was psychodrama or something. Oh, wow, here's Trump again. She should not do that.
Should not do that in
Italy
public.
is not necessarily critical to the economic or military health of the United States, as beautiful as it is, and how much we all love Italy,
Yeah.
nevertheless, if
Well,
that's true.
yes. Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back for 1945 in World War II. And we'll probably come back to a few of these things in our third segment, but stay with us, and we'll be right back. I would like to take a moment to welcome a new sponsor, Vibriance. The ingredients in Vibriance Super C Serum can replace your day creams, night creams, wrinkle creams, neck creams, and even dark spot reducers. Made in USA of the highest quality ingredients, including vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, vitamin B5, and vitamin E, Super C Serum delivers noticeable results. Simplify your skincare routine. Get a healthier complexion and minimize wrinkles and age spots with Vibriance. And if you don't find it better than your current skincare routine, you'll get a full refund. Go to Vibriance.com/Victor and save up to 37% and free shipping. That's Vibriance, Vibriance, Vibriance.com/Victor. I used it for the first time the other day, and it made my skin immediately feel softer and moister. What a difference. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. I forgot at the beginning to tell everybody, especially new people, who Victor is. He is the Martin and Illie Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. He has a website where you can find all his work. So he writes articles and books and does podcasts. So you can find him in all sorts of formats at his website, which is victorhanson.com. And the name of the website is The Blade of Perseus. Please come join us there.
Yeah, and today is 7 days ago to this very hour, I had my operation.
And you look great, to tell you the truth.
No, it's kind of gross that I had to have some diseased bone taken out, so it was a little bit more complicated and longer, but and I'm a little bit fatigued and debilitated, but the doctor was very good. You know, they encourage nasal washes. So I keep doing it. You have to be careful not to do it too much, blow, but you get drainage. But apparently I had 4 months of, what's the word for in polite conversation?
Precious bodily fluids.
Yes. Elmer paste that was glued in there that could not get out. And I had no opening whatsoever. So antibiotic, nothing would work. But now that he drilled these holes and he cut out this bone, it's starting to drill. But what's coming out is all of a sudden I sneezed and it looked like black cherry jello. I mean, it was just gross. It was so massive. And I thought, wow, I wonder if I should call him. Then I remember the last time I had an operation, he had told me that if the color is black, it's dead, dried, it's there. So, and what I'm getting at is that I think when you do steam and neti wash, all that stuff, the opening now, he had to open it again. It had a scab on my 5-day follow-up, but I'm thinking it's starting to come out, whatever it is. And if it comes out, I'll get my energy back.
So for all of those who are oogie about precious bodily fluids like I am, I apologize for Victor's description of things, but we'll get to World War II now. So Victor, the end of the war. So happy that...
Well, it had been decided in the winter of 45, the Yalta Agreement, that a couple of things were decided that are quite controversial, because Alger Hirsch's people were there, that Germany would be divided, and we argued for a French zone, so the French, British, and Americans would form independent zones. Of course, they would absorb each other and become West Germany, but Russia would get the eastern part, but more importantly, Russia would get Berlin. And Ike and everybody said that was a good idea that Roosevelt had done. Roosevelt would die in April, so he was so sick. But I think if we had gone in with the Third Army from the Czechoslovakia, then they wouldn't have resisted us, and we wouldn't have had the problem with the Berlin airlift. So my point is there were decisions made at Potsdam that reflected the realities on the ground. And I mean, at Yalta, and the reality of the ground was that we had about 120 divisions, we, the British, Canadians, the American, and they had about 400. We were supplying 25% of their logistical capability to Russia. So what happened in 1945, there was one last gasp. In December, everybody remember, the German army went into complete radio silence, and they decided, General Halder and Keitel, mostly Halder and von Rundstedt, etc., they said the Allies are moving at a more rapid pace to get into Germany than even the Russians are. And they are a more existential threat. They're into Belgium, they're in the Ardennes, and they're coming into Germany, and they will come right through the Rhine. We have to stop them. So there was this idea that if they waited till snow and they could go complete radio silence, the Allied air superiority would not be a factor, and in snowy conditions, they could surprise two green divisions and head all the way to Antwerp and cut the British off from the Americans and destroy the logistical capability and then super peace. It's a crazy idea, but for the first week in the Battle of Bulge, it worked, and they really, it was our worst experience in Europe. The sad thing about it was the Third Army was heading toward, in September, it was heading toward the Rhine. It would have been there. And we diverted in late 44 for the Market Garden catastrophe of Montgomery. The idea you were going to take leapfrog with the 101st, the 82nd, and the 1st British Parachute Division, leapfrog over the tributaries of the Rhine into the Ruhr. It was a crazy idea. Anybody looks at that road will see it was impossible. But they diverted all this equipment and wherewithal from the Third and First Armies, so they couldn't reach the Rhine. But here's my point. As this bulge developed, Patton then was ordered to cut it off, get to Bastogne, but the idea was he was going to go in the middle of the bulge. And then the American reinforcements would take the tip of the bulge and push it back. He wanted to go all the way at the base, cut it off at the base, and they said, well, you can't do that, because he had said the same thing at the Falaise Gap, cut it off at the base, and then trap the whole 250,000 people. And they wouldn't let him do that. It would have been risky because the balloon could have broken, but the point is that when you look at Bastogne and the casualties before Bastogne, Christmas Day of 1944, and the casualties after, till they got back all the ground, they lost more people from Christmas to January 25 than they did at the beginning of the German campaign. Once that was exhausted, they really had no fresh troops. So then in March, they went over the Rhine. They had the Remagen Bridge. Patton bridged it. Montgomery had some kind of crazy, ceremonial. He had artillery strikes, bombing, parachutes, and Patton kind of called up Bradley. I sneaked across last night, and then they just were unleashed, and they had fought in. General Model had held them back, and the Battle of Bulge had held them, and then they just went wild in March and April, and they got to the Elbe River in March, and that was it. At that point, they had about 5 to 10, more like 10,000 bombers, Lancasters, which had a huge payload, 15,000 pounds. They had B-17s, they had B-24s, they had B-26s and B-25 medium bombs. What do you do with all of them? So there was this idea that you could transfer this over to the Pacific, and the British fleet was now freed up. And there were this, 1.5 million men in Europe, battle-trained veterans, and many of them were going to be designated to invade Japan. So Operation Coronet and Intrepid said that in late November 1945, we were going to invade Honshu, and then we were going to go and march into the main island. And so LeMay, while this was happening, we invaded on April Fool's Day of Okinawa, and we thought after Iwo Jima and Taro, we had it down. Everything went great in the Pacific. 6th Marine Division. It was a special division of people that had college degrees. Some of the old breed from the 1st Division were training them. Crack Division, they had the 1st Marine Division, probably the most formidable group of people ever fought for America, who had fought so gallantly at Guadalcanal and elsewhere. And they landed in Okinawa, they mopped it up, and then they didn't realize what was going on. The Japanese were burrowed in coral, reinforced, and they wanted them to come in. And then the fleet came in, and they unleashed 7,000 kamikazes. And they sunk 17 ships, they killed 5,000 sailors, and they killed about 8,000 Marines and Army, 12,000 total. Casualties were probably 40 to 50,000 wounded, missing. And that thing went on all the way to July. Officially, it was declared secure, I think, in mid-June, but there was still action. And then the highest ranking officer in the Pacific, Simon Bolivar Buckler, a third, he got killed. He was watching it, the mop up. It was almost the battle was over. People were criticizing him. They said, "Why didn't you let the Marines have amphibious landings to get around the Shuri line? And why did you send the Marines head on against the Japanese? They were dug in." And he was a good guy. And anyway, a isolated remnant, vestigial, I think it was a mortar or an artillery round, hit some coral, and that sliver went right through a group of people around. I don't mean through their bodies, but right the only possible trajectory, and they hit him and killed him. And my grandfather, who was very much, you could tell he was Swedish, had a very thick, he and his father, his father and mother had come over. I think he was born as soon as they got in the United States. She was pregnant. And, when I was talking about Victor Hanson, I was named after, he'd always say, he's a Marine. He was a Marine. And they just go head on. Why do they go head on? They go head on, they get him killed. It was very bitter his whole life. Very proud, but very bitter. And then after you take Okinawa, you see everything changed. The British were responsible for reclaiming Burma, and they were going to. Then we have we have land in the Philippines. That was a horrific battle at Manila. And then you have a problem, and that is, how do you end the war in the Pacific with Japan? Japan had about 6 million soldiers and civilian National Guards people. They had 8,000 to 9,000 planes. And most of them were kamikaze. They were much more effective than a cruise missile with a 500-pound bomb, and the range is doubled because you don't have to go back. And you've got all these ships sitting around. And then you look at where you're going to have to stage off Okinawa, and Okinawa cost 50,000 casualties, and this was nothing compared to invading that. So everybody was thinking, how are we going to solve this problem? We're going to lose 1 million at least. And I think they would have. So then we did a dumb thing at at Potsdam in July. We looked at this and we let the Soviets. We thought that since the Soviet army was idle, we thought, well, maybe you can help us so we don't have to invade Japan. Maybe, and all they said was, yeah, we'll take Korea, North Korea, we'll take Manchuria, we'll take some Sakhalin Islands. That was a really dumb thing to do because we could have handled it. And there were two poles of thought. There was the Manhattan Project, the $1 billion. It wasn't the most expensive, but it was connected. The B-29 was $2.5 billion in 1945 dollars. So we had the plane that could carry 20,000 pounds. And so this project is working at Tinian, where the 509th was based. It was working parallel to Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay said, he didn't know what it was, but he was very angry afterwards because he looked at the map where Okinawa was, and he had about 2,300 B-29s on the Marianas, Tinian, Saipan, and Guam, but they had to fly 1,600 miles one way and then go back, and they only had fuel for about 20 minutes and they were mining harbors. They were bombing secondary targets. But he had, in April, he thought within a month, and the Seabees were building runways before Okinawa was declared secure. So by July, he had these huge runways under construction, and his eyes got big. He thought we have another 2,000 B-29s on order from the United States, but more importantly, they've got land. The British wanted in. They've got land. That was a wonderful plane. And then we've got the B-17s and B-24s. He was talking about 5, 6, 8, 10,000 bombers, and not going 3 or 4 times a week, but going twice a day at only 360. So in his view, he could have, and when he was envisioning this, he had been bombing since March 11th. So by the end of the European war in May 12th, he had all of April and May. For 60 days, they had burned Japan with napalm. And by midsummer, you could argue that 65% of the industrial capacity of Japan was over with, and the major cities, with the exception of Kyoto, was in ruins. And yet he said afterwards, we did not have to invade, not because of the atomic bomb, but because my bomber force, B-29s, new Mariana B-29s, new B-29s, 17s, 24s, Lancasters, everything. I could have just saturated the skies. A final thing is really important in 1945 when we achieved air supremacy in Europe. All those Americans and British, probably 80,000 that died from 39 all the way in the case of the British to 43, 44. And ours 42, 43, 44. They finally mastered strategic bombing, and they did it by, in the case of the Americans, by not being committed or wedded to precision Norden site bombing, but following the British area bombing and having fighter escort. And then brilliant Jimmy Doodle in charge of fighter escort, letting the fighters detach and go after Germans. But what's I just finished with, we always think that the Americans won the war with quantity and not quality. And the Germans were technicians, and they over engineered, and the Russians just wanted mass. So their T-34s or their tank destroyer, they were massive. Katyusha, that's all true. But when you actually look at what the Americans did, they were very technologically superior. The Essex carrier was the most deadly ship in the world, and we had about 25 of them, 28,000-ton carriers, wonderful carriers. We had the P-47 Workhorse Thunderbolt. It had a supercharger. It was indestructible. And then we had the P-51. We put a Rolls-Royce liquid-cooled engine into it, and the P-51 Mustang was as good or better than the Focke-Wulf 190. And they were even shooting down Messerschmitt jets for a while. And then in the Pacific, we came out with a Corsair, and the British loved it. They used it on their carriers, and we had the Hellcat, this big, huge fighter that was better than anything the Japanese had in quantity. And when you look at the Iowa-class battleships, it was the best battleship in the world. North Carolina had been good. You look at destroyers, cruisers, submarines. Our submarines were better than the U-boats. But weirdest of all was Liberty ships, which were hastily put together. They could build them in a week. We built over 3,000 cargo ships. We finally came up with these Victory ships, sophisticated big cargo ships, and we were building them every 2 weeks. They were brilliant. And that's not even talking about discoveries like the atomic bomb and sophisticated American radar we adapted from the British and improved, and proximity shells on artillery. We invented that. The idea that if you're in a foxhole, in the old days, the shrapnel would hit and it would go along the surface, so you were safe. But the idea that you could put a kind of a barometer type device and calibrate when it would explode, so you were exploding 10, 20, 50, 100 feet, 200 above, and it would kill everybody. It was a horrific weapon. So all those things came out of American engineering, and we made the best. At the end of the war, I think you could say, in quantity, we had the best plane. I mean, the jets were German invention and rocketry, but if you look at the most lethal, most of the best and you look at everything, even the Sherman tank has been unfairly derided. It was not a main battle tank. You had to ship it overseas. It couldn't be 40, 50 tons like a Tiger II or something, but it was durable. It was reliable. It could be upgunned. It could be adapted for anything. And we made almost 45,000, I think, of them. So the and then the final thing is that was the, as I said earlier, the worst part of the war. So many families got people. They thought the war was over, or going to be over very quickly after we crossed the Rhine, and they had no idea. February was Iwo Jima, but April was Okinawa. That was the worst battle of the entire Pacific War for us. And then it was too bad that all these people got killed, and then we brought the Russians in, and then as soon as we brought the Russians in, within a year after the war, we realized that we went into over freedom in Eastern Europe. That's what caused the war with the invasion of Poland, and we ended up guaranteeing they didn't have any. And I don't know what the solution was. One final thing, Churchill was the one who started the idea that you talk to the Russians and you use them. See, we weren't in the war when Russia invaded on June 22nd of 1941, but he said I would enlist Satan himself if he would help me kill Germans. So he was very realpolitik. He hated Stalin, he hated communism, but he was a visionary and he understood that if the Red Army could be armed and be an ally, a lot of people said, just back off. And Germany's not in the West anymore. They're fighting only in the East. They have one front. Just let them go, and these two horrific regimes will just kill each other. But he understood that Germany was a existential threat closer to Britain, and it was even more evil given the death camps. And he had, so anyway, that strategy that I'm making, that I'm critiquing of welcoming the Soviets, given the Cold War, there was a logic to it. Of the 5 million people in the German army, 75% were killed on the Russian front, and that cost them 27 million people. And that's why World War One, all of the Americans and all the British killed in World War II were less than the British lost alone in World War One. And we lost, we were in a horrific war for 4 years, and we lost 117,000 in World War One, but I think we only lost in combat about 420,000. So that was an amazing achievement given the people we had to defeat and make unconditionally surrender. When Trump said the only thing he's going to ask the Iranians is unconditional surrender, I thought, is a U.S. grant? What were your terms? Unconditional surrender. Fort Donelson and Fort Henry. And then, so I think Trump always references two generals as his heroes. One, I think, quite justifiably Patton, but he likes MacArthur too. MacArthur's a much more problematic general than Patton. I'm not talking about personality or hysterics, but just his record compared to Patton.
So I have a question then, given the war we're in currently. It seems that when the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan, the emperor didn't respond quickly or for whatever reason, and accept that these Western powers had something much more powerful than his whole country could resist.
He did it pretty
And
quickly.
today,
It was
well, I was,
6th and 9th.
yeah.
And they were pretty much within a week or two, they were in negotiations to quit. He had almost a coup by the military. They wanted to kidnap him. But I know the official date was September 2nd, but if you look at what they were actually doing, they were pretty much resigned to it. And later afterwards, by the way, they didn't say that the atomic bomb was what forced them. They said that they weren't not able to fight much longer because of the firebombing. So
well, that may well be true, but then they waited. A second atomic bomb was dropped on them, and then they said, okay, let's surrender. Is there any comparison to the Ayatollah Khamenei,
they're both
who's
fanatics,
seen
aren't
what,
they?
yeah, and you would think he has seen what Israel can do. He better start looking at the negotiating table.
Well, the difference is that Japan was a country of about 65 or 70 million people, and we were a country of 140 million, and the Soviet Union was 240 million, and Britain was 60 million. So when Japan looked around and looked at all, there was no more Germany or Italy. There was overwhelming odds everywhere. But what the Iranians are looking at, oh, we got 90 plus million people. We're the size of Texas. Look at this little Israel, 10 million people. And there's 500 million Muslims surrounding it. So at some point, Hezbollah will arise from the ashes. The Houthis will, Hamas will come back. The Palestinian Authority, Syria will, they have all these dreams that they have all of the advantages of demography and area and resources and wealth. And they just can't believe that these brilliant Israelis are beating them because they're, I mean, you think about it, they've only got, it's kind of like Colorado fighting, you know, Iran. They don't have that much resources. And yet, I mean, just think of the wear and tear. They have about 400 F-16s, F-35. Just think of the wear of terror of flying. It's like flying from San Francisco, I don't know, all the way to the eastern Texas border every night. I mean, the wear and tear on the engines and all, they're really going, and I don't know how they have any replacements for those. They've had 500 projectiles sent at them, and think of all the anti-aircraft munitions they've had, rockets they've had to put up. I don't know how many they have. I hope we're. One thing I am optimistic about is that our CENTCOM commander, Eric Kurilla, he was, as I mentioned once, he was a very heroic person as a colonel in the Iraq War, combat veteran. And there was a lot of things written by correspondents about him. And he is, I think, the most capable of all American generals. And I just say that because there was a couple of news stories today that Trump is talking directly to him and to the chairman that he appointed in the Joint Chiefs. Everybody should realize that had Trump not done what he did when he came in and cleaned house, we would be getting John Bolton like leaks, Jim Mattis like leaks. I'm not disparaging their character. Leaks the wrong word, but there would be reports that they were dissatisfied, or Bill Barr, or his legal team were always leaking. Ty Cobb didn't like Trump, and anonymous. There's none of that. So he's got people that he can get on the phone and call, and they are on the same page, and that's a big difference.
It's amazing, and it's great for us because you want an administration that has that kind of solidarity,
well, it
I
just
think.
means that they're loyal to him, and they're not going to try to weasel around and call the New York Times or be like Scaramucci and call up and say, oh, he's kind of an idiot. Or Bannon did that too. Bannon made fun of the Mercer family. I mean, Robert Mercer there's no better person. I've met him. He's a wonderful person, but they were making fun of him. And they were leaking. So they don't have the inner circle, the cabinet, the advisors are wedded to the same agenda, and they like Trump, and they know that if they were to do what the first bunch did, they would be in trouble.
Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about, you were mentioning something about things that are sane and insane. And Guy Benson says that this particular show is the Daily National Insane Asylum, and we'll talk about some things coming from that. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor on YouTube and on Rumble. These podcasts are there. And we also are on Spotify. The Victor Davis Hanson Podcast for Spotify is the name of it. So, Victor, the Guy Benson's Daily National Insane Asylum is The View, and they were having a little argument over where it would be better to live. And a young girl, Alyssa, I don't know her last name, was saying that nobody would want to go live in Iran if they could live in America. It was
Alyssa
much better.
Griffith, is that her name?
Maybe.
She worked for Trump.
Oh, did she?
And then she was an apostate.
And Whoopi Goldberg fired back with, not if you're black. And so I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, here you have a multimillionaire actress who um, was given all sorts of roles. She adopted a name so she can say all she wants about white people, but she adopted a Jewish name as a pseudonym, and she's been very blessed. And we are in now to 60 years of racial preferences and affirmative action since 65. Civil Rights Act, Great Society. We probably spent 30 trillion on Great Society redistribution, anti-poverty, pro-racial preferences, all that. So with all of that, and you look at the income of, say, black women, I think the income of the per capita income of black women is almost what it is of white males without college education, or maybe it's higher. So I don't quite, if you look at certain demographics, life expectancy, the people who have the greatest plunge in life expectancy are white males. And if you look at the suicide rate, it's about double what the black rate is, and the black and Hispanic. If you look at the actual number of people below the poverty line in terms of actual numbers rather than percentages, it's the white population. So it's what she says sitting there on television, and she's an ignoramus. She knows no history. Every time she mentions something about the Holocaust, she gets the dates wrong, she gets the information wrong, and they're almost illiterate, all of them. And so they have this little forum, their audience is shrinking, and they just say things that if it was reversed, mutatis mutandis, if it was somebody else talking in such blatant racial terms, they would have been off the air a long time ago. I think it's kind of sad because Barbara, what's her name, who
Barbara. Oh my gosh, we both forgot the most important
yes,
female anchor
Barbara
in
Walters.
Walters. Yeah.
Yes, she had a dream of a bunch of liberal professional women with two genuine conservatives or something, and having a polite debate on culture or fashion. And what they got are four or five raving lunatics that are hard left and they don't know anything. I mean, there are people on the left that are educated and they don't know anything. When I look at them and I listen to, is that Mark Rufio? He said something the other day. When I look at all these Hollywood celebrities, they're all multimillionaires and they're all privileged. They all live in places like Malibu, Brentwood, Palos Verdes Estates, Beverly Hills, and they're all privileged. It reminds me, it's like it's a vestigial elite among the ruins. And then I look at LA, and specifically LA, and then California in general, and they don't even know how irrelevant. When I see Beyonce, or I see, Jay-Z or Brad Pitt, and they mouth off or they say something, I thought, you can't even go to your little Sunset Boulevard restaurants anymore. They've been shut down. You can't even feel safe. They kill somebody in Beverly Hills. It's just starting the logical ramifications of your ideology that you pushed on it. Let in all the illegal aliens. Do not defund the police. Go Palestine. Globalize the. It's finally coming home to you. Even your wealth can't protect you. Pacific Palisades was destroyed because of DI. When you have a mayor who goes to Ghana, or you have a deputy mayor who phones in a bomb threat, or you have the head of Water and Power who's incompetent, or you have a fire chief more interested in your sex or race, that's what you get. And so when you look at California and what Gavin Newsom, and you see what they did, all these people thought, well, I live on the coast, or I'm a Silicon Valley titan. I have so much money. And then you hear what they're talking about, illegal immigration. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's, well, who's going to pick our crops? One woman who represented said, who's going to wipe our rectums? She said that. It was the most racist thing you can imagine. And you get an insight into these wealthy, it's not just wealthy white people, wealthy minority white people, all of these wealthy elites, they look at illegal immigration as you're all going to come in here and serve me and do all this stuff. And all the social problems from it, no audits, no background checks, leaving the scene of the accident, all of that, the racists will deal with hoi polloi we'll deal with, the stupid Neanderthal white working class whose wages go down. We don't care about the collateral damage, but we want our fruit. We want our Whole Foods strawberries. They have such a weird, they don't even understand that we're in the biggest agricultural revolution. I was walking out in the almond orchard today, and I just looked at it and I thought, it's one guy. One guy goes up and down in a four-wheeler and he checks to see if the coyotes have cut the there's no when I was a kid you had to go out there and get on that tractor and make furrows, and then you have a concrete pipeline with a twister. I did that for my whole youth, and then I had to come in and disc the furrows down and then spring tooth it, and then I got a mallet and hit almonds, and then I had canvas and I had to dump it in, and it it's all machine. It's like some brain says, hydrometers say the ground is dry. Boom, send a signal to the pump, turns it on. The pump says, oh, nitrogen needs, boom, starts pumping nitrogen into the water. They can pick 50 acres of almonds in 2 days with three people. So they don't understand that we're in a revolution, and the more that you raise wages, for American citizens, the better off they are. But that also is a greater incentive to mechanize. And the more you let in cheap labor, and then the more social problems you have, the more disparities in income, the more anger, envy you develop, the more social programs you have to, health, education, housing, food to make up for a standard of living. And the more a farmer says, well, if I can hire somebody for $7 or $8 until recently, then why go invest in a machine? But it's agriculture and all of these things, maybe not restaurants yet or hospitality, but we're getting to the point that they're pretty much mechanized. And with AI, we're going to have a lot of jobs. I was reading the other day that AI is going to put out a lot of financial people and a lot of intellectuals, media writers. I have a suggestion. One of the most innovative companies I've ever seen in my life is called Fowler Packing. It was created by four brothers from Armenia, and their kids and grandkids run it. And it is the world's greatest producer of a type of cuties, tangerines, mandarin oranges. But they also have table grapes. And every once in a while I go over there. They have a beautiful cafeteria. They have dental, they have a doctor on call. It's very humane and it's spotless, and their workers are not considered farm laborers. They pick grapes and they're considered specialists, and they're paid by the rate. And I think they're so good at what they do, their hourly compensation based on piecework is well above $30 an hour. And they're very skilled. But I suggest, and it's a very noble thing to do, I suggest that all these unemployed white collar workers, with their sociology or their business administration, whatever degree they have, they should start doing this. They should say, you know what? We need food. We need plumbers. We need electricians. AI put me out of business. I'm going to be a skilled technician. And when I hear the people on The View say, well, who's going to pick your fruit? They think they're back in 1970 with Cesar Chavez. And by the way, Cesar Chavez went down to the border. It was kind of like Eisenhower's Operation Wetback. They used physical force to club people coming across because they didn't want illegal aliens undercutting UFW wages. But when I hear all these elite, wealthy women, oh, who's going to clean my rear end? Oh, who's going to cook my food? Who's going to do this? Well, why don't you do it? Or why doesn't somebody who's unemployed do it?
Yes,
Why do we
exactly.
need, you
Do
know
it
what the labor
themselves.
participation rate is right now of able-bodied people who are working? 62%. So we've
We've
got
got
38%
38%.
are not working, and we need to get them in the workforce. And there's nothing more noble than farm work,
Yeah,
especially in
absolutely.
the age of mechanized aided farm work.
Well, since we're speaking of the elite, Obama has
God.
come out of his hole once again to give a
You mean his
lecture to
mansion?
out of his hole that led to his mansion, to give advice to those elite that followed him and the progressive elite. And he says, well, with me, you could have a social conscience and there would be no price that you had to pay for it. But now, under Donald Trump, your social conscience will have to pay a price. And it may mean, you know, his example of his price was, you may not be able to remodel your Hampton kitchen.
Or go to Milan, I think he said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Milan's a big tourist trap. I thought he would mention Venice or Florence. You know, he always projects. He was some of the people who cooked up the idea in February, March, April of 2020 that Spartacus, Buttigieg, Warren, Sanders were losers, and that they were going to get this waxen effigy called Joe Biden and rebrand him as good old Joe. Remember, he said when Joe ran and was thinking of running, he said, Joe, you don't have to do this, meaning he knew he was senile. But they cooked up the idea to use him as a waxen effigy. But he always gives what what he really thinks by projecting. Earlier in his last year of presidency, they asked him if he'd ever thought of a third term. He said, well, I could just sit down in the weight room in the gym and call in and don't have to wear that tie and just kind of be the secret brain behind. And that's what exactly he was thinking about. And he did. And now when he says, all you wealthy liberals need to get out on the street and fight and don't think your money, what he's basically saying is my money and my house, my multi-million dollar Chicago home and my $9 million Caloroma home, and he got it for 14, but it was probably worth 30 million in Martha's Vineyard, and my multi-million dollar Hawaii, 4 homes. And he's thinking, I've just been hanging around with Hollywood elites, and I call them up and they write me a check for 5 or 6 million. I said, I have an idea for a TV show. It'll be about community organizing and black and white and interracial. Oh, that's brilliant, Brock. How much do you need? 10 million? That's what he's been doing. And he hasn't done anything. So now he looks guilty. So given how he thinks and projects, all my guilt, all my secret desire, I gotta go trash people who do what I do. And so, that's what he did. And he's still hurting because you know what? He kind of flew in from one of his mansions during the campaign and thought, well, yeah, Barack Obama's here and I'm here. And, he did the same thing when he's talking about wealthy liberals with black males. He went up to them and, just because you're, some of your black male, I hear, you like a strong leader and you like Donald Trump and don't do it. Don't do it. Don't be fooled. Let me tell you what's good for you. I know. I know what's in your real interest. And they just basically said, okay, go back in your jet and go back in your Gulfstream and get back here. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Everybody's
We've
sick
had
of him.
enough of him.
Everybody is
Yeah.
sick of him. And every time Michelle opens her mouth, it's all you have to do is say, what is the grievance meter? 1 to 10. Oh, you don't know how much I had to pay. We had to pay for our own food at the White House. They raised the bar on us. Oh, we
I,
had to get clothes.
I
Oh,
think
the
that
people look at me and they all say, what's she wearing today? Oh, I'm such a victim. That's how she does.
she throws the grievance meter way off
And
the
she's a cry
scale.
bully, too. She's passive aggressive. She's always bullying somebody, and so is he. Why don't they just go away? He had his 8 years. He wrecked the country. That was the idea. We're only 5 days away from fundamentally transforming you did it. You gave us Obamacare. You gave us destroyed our foreign policy. You let Putin into Ukraine. You did everything you wanted to do. And you got into your Trayvon Martin thing. You got in your beer summit thing. You got in all of that.
Gave a lot of power to Iran
You did,
thing as
yeah. Valerie
well.
Jarrett and you got your Iranian thing. Why don't you just go back and crawl back where you go back to Hawaii and sit there and go on your yachts with your Hollywood celebrities? We're sick of you.
Yeah. Go, what is it? Just go. Go
Oh, that
away.
was that
Just go.
famous
line by one of those British
Yeah, it was.
PMs or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his name. He was funny. He quoted Cromwell.
It wasn't Halifax.
No, it was a no, 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 no. It was a. Yeah,
Just
it wasn't.
go.
What's his name? I'll remember it in a
Okay, so
second.
let me read a
But
few.
anyway, he said it was from Cromwell. We've had enough of you. Be done. Let us be done with you. Just go. It was from Oliver Cromwell. It was quoted about Chamberlain and the conservative Tory appeasers.
All right, Victor. So we're at the end of our show. And I would be remiss, actually, since we just did World War II for 5 weeks, not saying that people should go out. If you haven't read Victor's book, The Second World Wars, it's probably, in my estimation, one of the best books he's ever written, because he does deal with about 7 different opinions or theories on different things in World War II in a way that they haven't been dealt with before. So it definitely has a lot of new material and perspective in it. That's called The Second World Wars with an S. And again, that's Victor's fairly recent, 2017, 18, something like that.
Yeah, it is. It had a Chinese version that sold well, but as I said earlier, the Chinese wrote me through my agent and said, I think the end of everything's got about 15 or 20 foreign published translations, but they wanted to translate it, and they looked at the Second World Wars and saw that Japan comes off pretty bad, and therefore they thought this will be good for us. But they wanted me to take out one line in the end of everything. And I had quoted that they had made a video about nuking Japan. And they said, if you take that out, we will have big sales in China. Can't do that.
No, can't do that.
So my agent, Glenn Hartley and Lynn Chu, are wonderful people. And they wrote me and said, you've got to make a decision, but we know what you're going to do, because that's what we would do. And so they were all, we've been 30 years with them.
All right.
Oh, excuse me, 40 years, I think.
All right, Victor. So let's go ahead and look. I went to your website this time and a couple of the articles and looked at comments on them. And this one's off of Can the Left Ever Stop the Craziness? And this was by Strategic Viewpoint. And he says, Trump is a centrist. He's not even far right or radical. He's not particularly effective as POTUS, but then it can be argued that no president can be, since their powers are limited to commander-in-chief, foreign policy, veto over legislation, and executive order affecting the government bureaucracy. Trump derangement syndrome must be regarded as mass hysteria or mass psychosis, similar to the Inquisition, witch trials, or millennialism. This is distinct from the riots and anarchy, which is clearly staged and funded by domestic foreign powers. And
yeah, I think
thank
what
you.
he's saying is, if you look what Trump has actually done, and you look at what the left has said they always were for, I mean, if you ask yourself, who hates Trump more, unions or Wall Street? It's Wall Street.
Wall Street, yes.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you ask yourself, who hates Trump more, the people who make over $500,000 or the people who make under 50? His constituency is working class, lower middle class. And now we know it's the majority of black males. I mean, I thought it was 26% in the election, but the latest Rasmussen poll had 53% of all blacks and Hispanics. So what I'm getting, and you ask yourself, who had been for tariffs and what they called free, not free, but fair trade? It was the left. So he's done a lot. Who would, if you said a president's going to demand there's no tax on tips, you think George H.W. Bush would have done that? No, he was for capital gains cuts nonstop. It was Trump. So the writer has a point. He's not a leftist, he's transactional. And so,
and then just one more, and this one was on the article on that was called "What Was Iran Thinking or Not?" You had a lot of comments on this one, and this is by Ron Nixon. He said, "I think all of you are going to feel this way." So this is what Ron Nixon says: "Thank you, PM Netanyahu and President Trump, for finally destroying the Iranian nuclear threat. The free world is breathing a massive sigh of relief. For years, we were told that we dare not attack Iran for fear of retaliation. So we might as well accept that they'll have the bomb. We were even told by a worthless Barack Obama that we could reason with Iran. Quote, if countries like Iran are willing to unclench their fists, they will extend the hand from us. Unquote. And I think he was quoting Barack Obama on that.
I think a lot of people don't realize because I looked at CNN the other day and MSNBC, and they really want to gin up the story that MAGA's in revolt. And when you actually look at the polls, they're not, and neither are Republicans in general. And you know what? And even the American people, by a slight margin, about 54% want Trump to hit them. I'm not going to weigh in on that particular issue other than to say I don't think that the media understands the deep anger and hatred that the Americans have for that government. And by that I mean for 50 years almost, you turned on your death to America, death to America, death to America, death to America, death to America. Oh, Hezbollah. And then they showed those pictures of Hezbollah. And then the news said, to a embassy blown up in Beirut, embassy, Marine barracks killed, Jews in Argentina butchered, and then death to Israel. We heard all of this. And then we were told again and again by our media and by Obama, everybody, did anybody see those pictures of Hezbollah? They're goose stepping. They're like the SS, Waffen SS. That's what the image we were supposed to believe. And then Hamas, they're not like the Palestinian Authority. They're just formidable. They're puritanical killers. And then the Houthis, they're crazy. You can't deal with them. And Iran is so far away. They're just out of range for Israel. They'd have to go over. They just can't do it. It would just crush Israel. They've got so many missiles they could, and one day they could destroy Tel Aviv. And then that's what we were told. I grew up, and I was in college during the Iranian hostage, and every single day, 44, there was this picture of this pathetic Cyrus Vance and pathetic Jimmy Carter, and then they would juxtapose it with all these students. These were not even the Khomeinists; these were students, and they were screaming "Death to America!" And I'm thinking, and so there's no goodwill there. There is no goodwill. And when I meet Iranian, to say this very controversial, I see a lot of Iranians when I go to Los Angeles. I was in the university system. There are two types of Iranian expatriates. Two. There is what I call the first wave. And these were the people in 78, 79, and 80 knew what was coming. And a lot of them were Jewish, and they got out. And most of them got out with some property. And they were for the Shah. And they were unabashedly pro-American. And now they're mostly in business. And they're very successful. And they're hyper-patriotic Americans. But then there's a second wave, and these were the goat's body but Bani Sadr European socialist communists, and they were in the university, they were in media, and they had this mistake, and they would quote us chapter and verse about Mossad, and he was this wonderful Lincoln character, and then British Petroleum and American CIA got rid of him, and it's your fault. And they really did believe that they were the brains behind the revolution. And Khomeini was just a vessel. He was just an idiotic, middle-aged relic. And they were going to take it over and then just dispense with him. They didn't realize the Shah had to pay him off, and the Shah should have never cut back on the bribery to the mullahs, because that's how he kept them in check. But anyway, they thought, the Shah was so crass, he was so right-wing, and he was so pro-Israel, pro-American, and now we're the brilliant intellectuals. And then they got what they wanted. They got the Shah, and they stayed about a year. And then Khomeini started rounding them up, killing them, hanging them, saying they were godless infidels. And they started flooding Europe, the United States. So when you meet today uh, an Iranian, I'm stereotyping, but it's based on my empirical experience. When you meet somebody that is in business in their 70s, late 60s, 70s, 80s, they are the most pro-American. They are the most eager to see these but then when you meet people in their 50s, 60s, a little bit younger, and they are reporters, they work for the government, they're in the media, they are in the universities. They are the ones that we always read about that are pro-Iranian, or they're mixed. Their idea is it was the United States that created Khomeini because you supported the Shah, and that made this crazy right-wing theocratic backlash. And if you hadn't supported the Shah, then we would have taken over and had our brilliant European socialism, and we wouldn't have had to deal with Khomeini. But he was a reaction to you, not us. No, 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 no. He hated you. You are godless, secular, and his way of thinking, and you got what you wanted. You took a morally ambiguous government that had some good and some bad, and you got rid of it in your puritanical zeal, and you got something that was pure evil, that you thought you could ride the back of the tiger, and the tiger turned his head and devoured you. And then you fled where to the evil West in general and the evil America in particular, and you got a job where? In our media, in our universities, in our government, in our bureaucracy, and you're doing very well. But they're the ones that are always blaming us. This is the Valerie Jarrett wing of the pro-Iranian. And I have no patience with them. I've had so many conversations and debates with them in my life.
And you would think that given what's going on right now, that whether it's Iran and such Iranians or China, they would look at the picture seriously and go, the strong power is the power that is free, open society.
The son of the Shah, is on. He should say, I mean, he's saying rise up, but the problem with rising up in all of these types of revolution, I saw it in Greece. I lived under the dictatorship 73 and 74 in Greece, Papadopoulos and Ioannidis. The problem is somebody has to get killed, and nobody wants to be the first one to get killed. But he is giving communiques, the Shah's son, and what he should say is, I will be a caretaker. I'll be like Juan Carlos when you got rid of Franco. I will come in for a year and I will stabilize things and I will draft a constitution and then we will have elections. And he might resonate. The other thing is that we have to be very careful. The United States and Israel, if we say we include Israel, and I think Israel's been pretty good. You always have to damn the theocracy, but not necessarily the Iranians. That's a lot of people say, well, you just said, Victor, you're sick of, I'm sick of the radical people. But if you want the Iranians on your side, the more they've had to put up with, they're like, when I was a teenager, whatever my parents were for about a year in my life, I was against. Well, they see that Khomeini-ism and they're against it. But they have to have something positive, so you have to appeal to them that I think the Israelis have been very brilliant in their targeting, because they look around and they don't see hospitals going up, they don't see schools, they see, well, wasn't that where I was tortured? Bam! Wasn't there where that crazy lunatic woman used to lecture me about Khomeini? Bam! Wasn't that the rumor where the nuclear program was? Bam! Isn't that where the Revolutionary National Guard barracks is? Bam! As long as you keep doing that, you'll win them over.
Well, let's hope. And I know we'll be talking more about that, and you'll be talking with Jack for next week. So thank you, Victor Davis Hanson, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you, everybody. I made it after my operation, 7 days.
And we're all happy. And we've got lots of wishes on the comments as well.
I didn't sneeze and give birth to some creature.
Alien. All right. This is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you, everybody.